Battery Bill. Battery Bill. For cameras, computers, cars, or scooters. For trucks, boats, jet skis, remotes. Battery Bill. Battery Bill.
Hey everybody, it's ESPN Fan Friday Talk Story, and I'm joined here today by Billy Hull from the Honolulu Star Advertiser, who covers high school sports, and we just recently concluded the HHSA State Football Championships, Open D1 and D2. Also, Billy is one of the co-hosts of KHON's Cover 2, and I believe just finished 10 seasons of that show.
Yep, 10 seasons. We wrapped it up on Thanksgiving, which usually happens a lot. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, Billy, thanks for taking the time with us. So when you kind of just, after a high school season like we had, what kind of sticks out to you, just regardless of the state championships, but just kind of overall the season? Players, teams, what kind of pops out to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, there was really two big storylines this year. One was obviously we knew coming into the season that this season was going to be about Kahuku football. We knew they were the defending state champions from last year. They had a really good team, but we kind of all knew based on the team they had coming back this year that they had a chance to be really special. And so they go out, they win the state championship here. They challenge themselves on the mainland. They played St. John Bosco, which just beat Mater Dei. And it looks like, I think Bosco might be the national champions this year. But they played them, and that was kind of I think it was a 34-7 game. But then they also got to play another top 10 team out in Kahuku, St. Francis Academy, and they nearly won that game. I mean, that game came down to the last drive. St. Francis pulled it out in the last minute. But I think it really showed not just that this really was one of the best Kahuku teams ever, one of the best high school teams we've seen ever, but they kind of showed that they kind of closed the gap a little bit with some of the best teams in the nation. I mean, I know still there's the St. John Boscos in the Mater Deis, but they showed in that St. Francis game that they're right there, top 10, top 15 in the country. I don't know where they're going to end up. There's some rankings out there that have them in the top 20. They're just outside of the Max Preps rankings. But, yeah, I think, this was kind of the year to see just how good Kahuku really was going to be. I think they passed all their tests. And then for me, the other real standout thing was the neighbor islands. I thought the final day of the state tournament, we had the Division I and the Division II state championships, and we didn't really know. I think the surprise coming in was we didn't really know how good football was on Kauai. And then that first night of the state tournament, I remember Kapa'a was beating Waipahu like 35-13 or something like that. And then Waipahu makes this great comeback and wins. But I remember looking at that score thinking, oh, you know what? I bet that Waimea team in Division II is pretty good. And sure enough, Waimea came out and just smoked everyone in the Division II tournament. Won the championship game against King Kekalike, the top seed. They beat them like 45-6 or something like that. So just a dominant performance by Waimea in Division II. And then in Division I, we had seen that Kona Waina had just destroyed everyone on the Big Island. But how good was the Big Island? We didn't really know. Could they come in and could they compete with, the top teams in the OIA? And they sure did. They beat IAEA in a memorable classic game on a last-second field goal as time expired to get to the championship. And then it was just one of the better games of the season was that Division I championship game on Saturday night. They beat Waipahu. Waipahu had a guy get hurt. Kona Waina had one of their best players ejected for a couple of unsportsmanlike penalties. It was wild. It was crazy. And, the kid who made the game-winning field goal against IAEA does it again, makes a big kick late to beat Waipahu. So, yeah, I just thought, the dominance of Kahuku and then just the success the neighbor island schools had this year were kind of the two big takeaways for me.
Let's go to Kahuku a little bit because, a lot of the talk is with Sterling Carvalho as the head coach that they kind of, modernize their offense. Before, Kahuku was, ground and pound running game, but they've kind of added more of a passing game. They became multi-dimensional. Their athletes became more personified. They were always dominant. They were always physical. But does that element now kind of create this super team that Kahuku, the way St. Louis was, back in the 2000s, early 2000s, where they were the kind of the standard? Has Kahuku kind of gone to that point now, you think?
Yeah, definitely, definitely the last couple of years, and I agree with you. I think part of it is that process of them becoming more balanced on offense, them kind of coming out and throwing the ball and getting it to their playmakers. Kai Carvalho was unfortunately hurt most of the year this year, but he had a great junior season and really was the spark they kind of changed the dynamic of that offense. But what's funny about this year is at the end of the day, when you really look at it, you look at that St. Francis game we talked about when they played the really good mainland team from Maryland. That was all about defense. That was all about goal line stands, making turnovers, relying on that defense in a low-scoring game. And then you kind of look at the way they won in the state tournament, right? I mean, they beat Punahou, and it was defense. It was all started and ended with the defense. You know, I don't think Punahou got past the Kahuku 35-yard line until a couple minutes into the fourth quarter. And that Punahou offense, we all thought coming in was really good and was really good all year. So at the end of the day, I think, yeah, you know, they've definitely made some strides, and I think it helps them become a more balanced team, and it's going to allow them to maybe compete a little more with the top mainland teams by being able to throw the ball like that. But when it comes to winning state championships in Hawaii, we saw this year they went back to old Mr. Reliable. They went all back to that defense, and that defense really lived up to the hype. Really played well, and you know, you look at all the college guys they have on that defense that are going to go play at the next level. That really was their bread and butter this year.
You know, when I looked at the state tournament, especially getting into the finals, I mean, the thing that stuck out to me was like, hey, there's no ILH aside from Punahou in the Open, but even in the semifinals, you know, like in D1, Iolani gets upset. There's no ILH other than Punahou that made it to the final game. I mean, and the neighbor islands, like you mentioned, did very well. 3 or 4 are in the semifinals for D2. What's the buzz? Is there a little bit about, what has happened to the ILH in any of that kind of conversation?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, you kind of look at it, Iolani's really kind of been, I mean, you obviously have St. Louis and Punahou at the top, right? But I think Iolani's kind of been that standard bearer in that next division. And, you know, they had a great year, but, you know, they just ran into a really good Waipalu team. I think a lot of us thought Waipalu was going to win the state championship. So to see Kona Waina come out and actually get it done, put up 38 points on them and win that game and make some big defensive stops, I thought was really impressive. But, you know, it's hard to really say too much. I mean, Iolani had a really good year, right? I mean, they had the longest winning streak in the state going into the state tournament. They hadn't lost, I believe, since it was the last game of 2019. So before the pandemic was the last time they lost before the state tournament this year. So, you know, they're still really good. I'm sure they'll be back. I think Damien, you know, they had a coaching change a couple of years ago, but Damien, you know, has got some really good players, and they actually gave Iolani a pretty good game the first meeting this year. So they're coming around, and you know, Pac-5 got into the Division II state tournament, played Nanakuli. So, you know, I think it's just kind of one of those years, and especially as we see now, as we've gone, I think in 2016 when we went to 3 divisions, I mean, the ILH only has, 6 teams or whatever like that. So the 3 divisions spreads them out even more. So that probably makes it a little bit more challenging for them. But I wouldn't worry. I'm sure we'll hear from that league again in the state tournament here pretty soon.
No, yeah, I'm sure there will. Anyone going to listen to this going, oh, yeah, this is just a fluke. Hey, you touched a little bit like with Kahuku's players, and we always want to think, now that the season's over, okay, where are some of them going to be, you know, exciting for college? Who's going to stay home and play for the University of Hawaii? Timmy Chang, obviously, as a local product, he has really made a big emphasis on wanting to recruit and keep as many local talent home. And that's been said previously, but of some of the top players, and do you know of maybe some possible where they might be going, and who are they?
Yeah, well, like I said, their defense is loaded. I want to say 6 of their starters on defense had at least one offer in the state final. Obviously, it begins with Leon Galifao, their middle linebacker, his top recruit in the state. He's going to sign with Texas. I believe he's going to be the first high school football player from Hawaii that's going to sign with Texas and be a Longhorn. So that's kind of pretty cool. So there's him. And then there's Utah. I mean, Utah's going to reap the rewards of a lot of these Kuku kids. Utah made a big splash this year. Brock Fonui-Moana, the safety, is going to go to Utah. Stanley Ross, the defensive lineman, I believe, is going to go to Utah. I think he just switched from BYU to Utah in the last month or whatever. Kaikai Carvalho is going to take his mission, but he's going to go to Utah. So, you know, those are 3 guys that are going to head over there. And then they got a couple of other guys. Leonard Ayu, we're still kind of waiting to see where he goes. We kind of thought maybe he would join his friends at Utah, but there might be some other options out there for him. So, yeah, they got a lot of guys going, but one of the things that I wrote about in my follow story the day after the game was, you know, you have all these kids, all these seniors making plays. It's a senior-laden defense. It's really good. And at the end of that game, you see a kid with a couple of minutes left. Puno had a chance to score and avoid the shutout. This kid comes flying out of nowhere and makes an interception. His name's Madden Soliai, and he's a 6-foot freshman who all he did was block 6 punts this year. So like it was kind of fitting for me at the end that you got all these seniors making plays, and then at the very end it's a freshman coming in. So even though they're going to lose a lot of guys at graduation, you better believe there's going to be a lot of guys coming up. So that talent, that they never get empty on talent on the North Shore. So there's a lot of kids in the underclass that are going to come up and make a difference here the next couple of years.
Yeah, those schools like Punahou, St. Louis, Kahuku, Mililani, they just tend to reload there, which is why they're always perennially successful. You know, you mentioned about how Kahuku played Bishop Gorman and then St. Francis. St. Louis, I think they had played Bishop Gorman before. And I always recall back to, I forgot what year it was, where they had that doubleheader at Aloha Stadium. St. Louis played De La Salle, and then Kahuku played Long Beach Poly. And those are two, they still are, but, two dominant high school programs from the state. And we're seeing a little more often now where St. Louis kind of had done it. They're kind of usually the trendsetters. They started going to the mainland and scheduling these games with top mainland powers. Now you're seeing Kahuku doing it. Do you forecast maybe even a Mililani or some other schools going to start kind of testing themselves against some of the best mainland high schools?
Yeah, I think that's definitely already kind of happening. I mean, I guess, you mentioned earlier, like, what were the takeaways from the season? I think one other takeaway from the season was there were a lot of schools that traveled this year. IAEA went and played a game in the Pacific Northwest in Bothell, which is near Seattle. Farrington played a game in Oregon. Radford traveled and played a game in California. Mililani was a part of that Trinity showcase where Mililani played Mater Dei, and then Kahuku played St. John Bosco. It was a doubleheader on the same night, which is really cool. And yeah, there's no question. I remember I talked to Rod York right after that game, and he was already trying to get him to play Mater Dei again in 2 years. So, I mean, Rod York's going to go out and try to play everybody, knowing him. So I think Mililani's going to be out there. And yeah, I think, especially when, I think Kahuku knew this year, right? I think Sterling knew, hey, this is going to be our year. So this is the year to go play St. John Bosco. This is the year to try to go bring in a St. Francis, because we think we can compete with them. But I don't think they're going to shy away from doing the future. St. John Bosco is coming out here. Kahuku's going to host them next year. It's kind of part of a home-and-home deal they had. So they're going to play them again. So that'll be really fun. But yeah, I think there's no question now that we're going to start to see and I think we were already kind of trending that way, and then the pandemic hit. But now that, we're kind of getting out of that, I think you're going to see a lot of teams, and not just for maybe for Kahuku's and the St. Louis's and the Punahous, it's about competing and trying to, win these big games and get ranked in the top 15 in the nation. But I think some of these other schools, just the opportunity to go out there and do a road trip, and at the same time go visit a bunch of schools and use it as a college learning experience, that's proved to be really beneficial. I know every coach that I've talked to that was able to do it this year thought it was just a tremendous experience for the kids. So I think in that regard, you're going to see a lot of these other schools doing it for those reasons as well. So yeah, I'd expect to see a lot of these teams traveling and playing games on the mainland in these next few years and moving on forward.
And then always after a season, even before a season, but definitely in the off season, athletic directors, coaches get together, and there are always some things you want to look at, and there are some concerns, maybe some issues that have transpired or have been just lingering from year to year, and you want to try and address it. And they have their conference, athletic directors conference in the summer. Sometimes those get remedied there, but I talked to a few coaches, and one of the things that I know was brought up a little bit was the fact how high school football and maybe high school sports overall is getting a little bit more collegiate, if you will, like the more traveling than there's ever been done as we progress now. And part of it is because ILH, they have only, for instance, if you're on the open division, St. Louis and Kamehameha and Punahou, they don't want to play each other like how on Kauai each time 3 times a game. So they want to schedule other games, and they're not getting maybe the cooperation from the OIA to schedule interleague. So there are those things. But also, for instance, St. Louis had a lot of players leave their school. So we're seeing some of that element that you see in college where people, the transfer portal, but that's not in high school. Is that and some other things that maybe as you talk to coaches, are these elements kind of concern? What other concerns maybe are popping up related to high school football?
Yeah, well, I mean, you always kind of begin with the obvious thing, right, is that we're in the situation where the ILH only has 6 schools, right, and then there's schools at very different levels. You have the teams at the top. I remember, Abu Ma'afala, who's a great coach, unfortunately got dismissed at Kamehameha when I was writing the story. I believe it was 28 of the 52 games he coached were against either St. Louis or Punahou. And so it's like, kind of good luck with that, when that's the only teams you're playing. Think about how hard that makes your job. And so there's no question every year those schools are trying to figure out, how to make a full schedule. We saw them. They did the thing with the OIA for 2 years where they played. Everyone kind of came together and did that. Doesn't sound like that's going to be happening anytime soon. And so, what do you do? There's always what do you do with Iolani? They're in Division II, and there's a lot of grumbling that they shouldn't be in Division II because they dominated. But now they're in that middle division, which I think is where they belong. But I think you're always trying to figure out how do we do the best job of making sure these schools are in the right divisions, playing the right teams. And just with the way things are in Hawaii, it's tough. It's why every year there's different kind of concerns. Every year in the OIA, you deal with teams like who's going to be those last couple of teams to play in the open division, or the top teams from Division I who maybe had good years this year, but maybe they had their good years because they had a really good senior class that's now going to be going away. So you take away all the best players from their senior class, and at the same time you move them up to the higher division. It's always a challenge. So every year I think we're always going to look at that. The ADs, the coaches, everyone's going to always look at that, but there just isn't that 100% solution that's perfect for every team. So I think that's kind of what every year you go in the offseason trying to figure out what can maybe we do better to try to make each one of these schools get the kind of schedule and the kind of year that they want to have.
What is your theory as to why, like you mentioned, the ILH OIA Interleague looks like it may not happen at least the next season? Why that is not continuously happening as it was a few years ago?
I think honestly the main thing is I don't think the OIA really feels like they need to have it. They've got enough teams that are in open division. They got enough, teams that they can balance it with their three division kind of system. And so I think it's more of a question of, the OIA, do they even really want to merge? They always kind of look at it as a public school versus private school thing. You have the private schools that have all these benefits and all these things they can do the public schools can't. I think they feel like the playing level's a little bit different. And so, I think it's more of a question of, I don't know if the OIA really feels any need to, and at the same time, that kind of puts the ILH in a tough spot. Like I said, when you have only 3 teams, St. Louis, Punahou, and Kamehameha, what do you do with them? Like you said, you don't want them to be playing each other 3-4 times a year or whatever. But, unfortunately, I just don't think there's really kind of an obvious solution to that. I think, one thing is when St. Louis was really a few years ago at their peak, I think they talked a lot about trying to, I'd heard from a couple of people that it was like, well, let's just go play a full national schedule. Let's play California teams and just load our schedule that way and become like a national kind of power. I think that's obviously kind of changed a little bit in the last 2 years. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's just a matter of OIA's kind of got things the way they want it, and they probably don't really feel like they need to do anything with the ILH. And that's kind of just the reality of where we're at right now.
How long do you think Ron and Cal Lee going to keep coaching over at St. Louis?
Man, as long as they want to, I think they, who's going to tell them that, hey, no, I think it's time to move on, whatever. So, hey, man, as long as they're having fun, as long as they're enjoying it, as long as they want to do it, they'll be there. Who knows, man? They might be there till the very end. Their final days might be on a football field, and it'd be fitting for everything they've done for that school and for how big they've been a part of high school football. I remember I started the year, and my first story I wrote was like a 50-year anniversary story on Kaiser football, and it's like, that was Ron Lee at the beginning, getting that program going. He was there for that too, and here he is now. All these, I'm writing a 50-year anniversary story, and here he is still coaching at St. Louis. So, hey, man, for as long as they want to coach, man, go out there, have fun, and keep doing what you love to do.
I didn't realize Wendell Sayed, and that's another guy just been there decades. And I was always curious. I look at St. Louis and I look at Kahuku. Those have been kind of the two main, for the OIA, the ILH. Kahuku has gone through numerous coaching changes, and as they went up, they went down. When they went down, there was a coaching change, up and then coaching. St. Louis has had some down years. They've had a few coaching changes in between, Darnell Arsenault, John Howe. But basically, once the Lees came back, then it kind of steadies the ship. And I don't know if it's a community thing or a culture thing with those two programs, but it seems like to be the coach at Kahuku is a little bit more volatile than to be the coach at St. Louis. I know they both have their pressure, to sustain that element of the standard of excellence. But do you kind of see that maybe at Kahuku, I don't know, maybe it's a community that there's a little bit shorter leash there sometimes, I think, with them.
Yeah, I think there was definitely in that mid kind of 2010s. I think it's funny when when I wrote that story at the end of the season this weekend. Sterling was actually, when he was hired, he was the fifth head coach out of 6 seasons, I believe. I think they went through 5 coaches in 6 years until Sterling got there, and that's one of the things that I think is part of what you're seeing with Cougar football now is that Sterling's a guy. He's been there for a while. I think he's going to be there for a long time. I don't expect him to leave anytime soon, and I don't think anyone's going to make a decision to get rid of him. So there's now some stability there, and I think that stability also plays a part in setting up the program, getting the program the way you want it, running the off-season stuff, the pylon kids or whatever, getting them doing different things and getting them ready for the season in different ways. And so yeah, there definitely was that there at Kuku, I believe, but I think Sterling's kind of the guy, and the way he's brought everyone together. The players talk about how much they love him and how organized he is, and I just think that now, I think Kuku went through a little bit of that kind of up and down part, but I think Sterling's kind of steadied the ship, and I think he's going to be the guy to be there for a while, and I think that's only a good thing for that school and that program.
It just kind of goes to show, right? I mean, no matter what level of coaching, winning still is the seasonal thing, the special sauce that covers over everything. As long as you win and you're successful, you're going to be okay. You lose a little bit, they say, oh, it's youth sports, high school, but no, there's enough pressure there with high school football. Wow, so 10 years of cover 2, looking for another 10?
I don't know. He kept saying that we're going to be back for an 11th season. I was like, are we sure? Have we talked about that yet? No, but it's been a lot of fun doing that. A lot of fun hanging out with the guys, Rob DeMello, Alan Hoshida, Christian Shimabuku, Rich Miyato, Mark Veneri. We just kind of get together every Thursday and have a little bit of fun, and somehow a 30-minute high school football show comes out of it. So it's been definitely appreciative I'm allowed to be a part of that.
Well, congratulations on that. Congratulations, as always, on great coverage with high school sports. And thanks for taking the time to be with us here on ESPN Fan Friday Talkstar. Now you can kind of chill. By the way, now that what's the next thing that you kind of focus on after football?
Well, this is vacation time for me. I'll be go visit my parents up in Seattle, but it's snowing up there already. It's already snowing in Seattle at the end of November, and I think I leave next week. I just looked at the weather report. The day I land, the low is supposed to be 16 degrees. So I'm going to have to double think this trip I have here planned up. So, it's vacation time for me, the holidays, and then we kind of get back in it. The Sony Opens comes every January, so that's kind of where we start getting back going.
All right. Well, enjoy vacation, stay warm, and thanks again for being a part of the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dave.